women, and children from the nearby port of New Haven, intending to cross the English Channel to go to France, where they would be settling in France. As the storm worsened, the ship floundered on the rocks, it was thrown on the rocks, and most of the passengers ended up in the water, and very few of them survived this disaster. The ship's captain, Victor Arbuckle was his name, was one of the first to get to safety on the shore. And instead of staying with his ship and helping the passengers, he quietly slipped into the night to escape. But he was noticed by several of his sailors, and they were determined to find him. All told, more than 200 people lost their lives that night on the Indian Princess when she went down on the rocks near Eastbourne. 2 days later, Captain Arbuckle was found hiding in a local hostelry, a carriage inn, about 3 miles away from the shipwreck, and he was brought to justice. After a week in prison, the captain was found guilty of, he had a swift trial and was found guilty of manslaughter and endangerment of human life and dereliction of duty, and he was sentenced to death. They didn't give him time to appeal, and 2 days later, the captain was led in shackles to his death to be hanged on the gallows. Fast forward 115 years. It's late evening on the mid-February, if I seem to remember, somewhere in the year of 1967. I was 17 at the time, and I was studying in the library at Eastbourne College. If you can think of a rather large Hogwarts, it looked rather like that. And it was on the south coast, only really a few hundred yards away from where the shipwreck occurred 115 years before. And I was in the library that evening. There were several students in the library, and we were studying. Seem to remember I was studying my physics and biology and organic chemistry, trying to get into vet school. We used to get into vet school pretty early in the British system. It was pitch dark outside, and you could see some lightning flashing over the English Channel. It was a very quiet evening, and the library was very quiet. Across the table from me, there was a student who was a year or two older than me, and he was studying, and he suddenly looked up at me and quietly said, "He's back." And I said, "Who's back?" He said, "It's the captain. Listen." And there it was. The shuffling of feet and the dragging of chains could be heard clearly in the library. It sounded like Captain Arbuckle was being taken to his death on the gallows. And that's when my colleague, the other student, told me the whole of this story. I was not aware of this story before that time. And as soon as the sounds appeared, they went away. People whispered. Clearly, some of them had heard this before, and then they got back to their reading. I never heard the sounds again, because, quite honest, I wasn't particularly keen on going back to the library in the evening and getting spooked out like that. The haunting of the library of Eastbourne College is handed down from generation to generation of students. What were those sounds? Was it really the sea captain being led reluctantly to his death? Or was it perhaps something more simple, like the old plumbing in the library and the hot water pipes rattling from time to time? We'll never know. So where you are and who you are with can profoundly affect your imagination and your sensory perception of things that are going on, as we talked about with Captain Arbuckle. I will never forget those sounds that I heard that evening many years ago. And that's my story of haunting. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dr. August. That was fantastic. I can almost see Captain Arbuckle now. So as we move forward with our haunted theme, one of the things about each of our themes is that it's going to be whatever haunted means to you. And so it could be a spooky story like Dr. August has just told, or it could take a different twist for you. Our next speaker maybe has a different take on haunted. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jason Mackey, who's another member of our college, our farrier, who has quite an interesting background as well, maybe a skirt with a law or two. Well, actually thinking about law school, but Jason, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. No, the scariest part about this whole evening for me is this Zoom meeting. I have never been on one, and the anxiety induced by being on the screen and trying to, okay, I didn't put it together. I can't admit. I thought I was going to act like I put it all together and did it myself. Heather set everything up for me because I know that I would have really wrecked it all. So here we are. I don't know that I have a haunted story. I think I have a blessed story, and I think the story that I want to tell makes me wonder if there are things beyond our control and things that we're unaware of. Um, 2 years ago, I was in the large animal hospital performing my job, and I was asked to work on a rather large, rather feral. Okay, she wasn't rather feral; she was horrifically feral. Frisian, and I don't remember why she was in the hospital, and it really doesn't matter. And it was a fairly busy morning, but I try to accommodate the requests that are made of me. And so I walked out of the lameness room, and I turned the corner to head towards to look down towards the crossroads. If any of y'all familiar with the large animal hospital, that's just the center cruciate, the center X in the middle. And there was a mare that was probably 1,400 pounds, and the technician was hanging on to the end of the line as she thrashed her way down the hallway. And I don't even remember who asked me to trim her, and I said, no, I'm not going to trim this horse. And they said, but we're going to sedate her. And I said, okay, let's give it a try. I said, I will agree. We'll take her outside. We'll sedate the mare. We'll give her an opportunity to settle, and I will see what happens. I said, but if she misbehaves, I'm not going to do this. I've been kicked and stomped and thrown and crunched too many times. And that was agreed to, and I think that was probably a reasonable thing to do. So we took her outside, and we allowed her to acclimate to the activity of the lameness pad, the people coming in and out of ICU, and the horses trotting back and forth, and the dump truck. And she was still pretty hot. But they sedated her with the Tomidine, and I waited about 5 minutes, and she literally just dropped her head. And I asked her rather tentatively for her right front foot, which she gladly gave to me. And I trimmed the foot as efficiently as I could, and I moved on to the next. And the whole time, I'm waiting for the problem. I'm waiting for the explosion, simply because in my experience with these sedated horses that are adrenalized, when they're sedated, they'll spontaneously erupt. They just kind of explode in all different directions. And I told Cassie, who was holding the horse, I said, be ready. I'm expecting her to explode. And I moved on to the left hind, and she was literally absolutely fine. She was relaxed and quiet and calm. And I started to feel like I was going to survive this without anything going wrong. Trimmed the foot, moved on to the right hind, and at this point I was pretty relaxed. And I said to Cassie, I said, be ready. The right hind is always the kicking foot. And it is. I mean, Jenny, if I'm going to be injured, it's going to be on a right hind foot. I actually think it's related to cross brain and emotional response, but it doesn't matter. Trim the foot, and I was literally getting ready to put the foot down, and I don't really know what happened, but this 1,400-pound mare lunged forward, twisted sideways, ran her foot / kicked me in the lateral right side of my ribs. And I was afraid for Cassie because she had exploded so quickly. And as I'm turning, I realized that I can't really breathe. And the mare runs around the lameness pad at one time, turns, stops, drops her head, and goes back to sleep. And I can't breathe. I literally just can't breathe. And so I'm coughing and coughing. And I go inside, and I sit down, and I'm trying to catch my breath. And I think it was Sandy saw me and said, Jason, what happened? And I told her. She said, well, we're going to the doctor. So she called Heather. They took me to the doctor. The occupational health doctor took one look at me, sent me to the emergency room, and they put me in the bed. They hooked me up to machines. They did everything that they were supposed to do. Did a radiograph, and it was really cold. I remember I was really, really cold. And then they said, well, we're going to do a CT because there's obviously a lot of organs and you were just kicked in the chest by a horse. And so I went, and I remember I was starting to feel better. I could breathe a little bit better. And I was making jokes, and I was feeling like myself. And I was actually warming up, and I didn't feel nearly as cold. And I came back to the room from the CT, and I asked, I need to go to the restroom. They said, well, okay, we'll pee in this cup. And I didn't think anything of it. So I did. And I came back, and I sat back down on the bed, and the doctor comes in, and I don't mean any disrespect, but he really looked like a 23-year-old frat boy. He was just this young, kind of stout, jovial guy. And I kind of enjoyed his company because I was laughing that this doctor looked like a kid. And he was stone gray. And he says, I have to tell you, you have a renal cell carcinoma in your right kidney. And I was like, the term cognitive dissonance doesn't really describe it well. But I looked at Heather, and she looked at me, and I said, can you repeat that? And he did. And I had warmed up, and I have to tell you, it literally felt like someone had poured ice water all the way through me. And I was stone cold and shivering. And he started talking. And I asked him to stop, and I said, I asked him to stop, and I said, I apologize. I am having a really hard time hearing you, and I think you're gonna have to give me a minute because I think I'm afraid. And so I did, and I took a minute, and I thought about it, and long story short, I ended up having my kidney removed. As so heretofore, we just had an exam 2 days ago. There's no metastasization, and I'm perfectly healthy. Earlier that week, the week that I almost didn't get under this horse, I had refused 2 previous horses. I said, I am not going to get under that horse. It is going to hurt me. And the same thing happened not long before that. And I don't really know why I got under her. There would have been nothing wrong with saying this isn't safe. But I sometimes get the feeling that someone was looking out for me, because in the time, within a year of when this was discovered, it would have metastasized, and I wouldn't be here now. I would be gone. And so I kind of feel like I was blessed and watched out for by something greater than myself. I don't know if it was the animals or God or it doesn't matter, but there's something greater than all of us that put a hand on me and guided me to this bad situation that was a blessing in disguise. And that's the story that I have.
Thanks for sharing, Jason. I can imagine that turning down that mare would have haunted you a lot more than actually doing that horse.
Absolutely. And when you're working with animals, no matter how careful you are, things happen. But I can't help but feel that this happened for a reason.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing your story, Jason. And
Thank
I know
you.
you're busy tonight being a parent at a football game and doing the due diligence that parents do. So I appreciate you taking time out for this. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you. All right. Our next storyteller is going to be our guest from Australia, only she's not a guest. She's a family member. She's a member of our CVMBS family. And so without further ado, Dr. Emma Wary, what are you sharing with us tonight?
Okay, my story's going to take a little bit of a different twist than the others, but hopefully will be just as entertaining. Maybe not as deep, but entertaining. So, growing up, most mothers sort of try and teach their daughters or give them little life lessons that are going to help them grow into young women and be successful. The life lesson that my mother taught me, and I remember this from a very, very early age, and it was sort of continued throughout my childhood, was whenever a man says, trust me, you can't trust them. And you would be surprised at how many times on television a man will say, trust me. And whenever a man would say, trust me on television, my mum would go off into this rant about how no one could ever trust a man if they said, trust me. And as a young kid, this is a little confusing because you're like, but I trust my dad. And she explained to me that it was okay to trust men, just not if they told you to trust me. And it was those two words. You couldn't use those two words together if you were a man. And if you did, we were supposed to run for the hill. And as you know, we got a little bit older, these tales and warnings got a little bit more focused on different areas. And as me and my sister got to stage in our life, it became all about protection during sex. And if they said trust me, you don't trust them, and all of that. Anyway, so that's sort of the mantra with which I grew up under, that whenever you hear trust me from a man, you have to run the other way. And so fast forward to the summer of probably 2004 or 2005, and I am in my first, proper relationship, and I'm stupid enough to think that I'm in love and we're going to live happily ever after and run off into the hills together and, whatever. It's way more bitter and jaded now, so no chance of that happening now. But I was living in Wagga Wagga at the time, which is a regional centre in New South Wales, and he was a member of the local football team, so rugby union, and it was the Wagga Wagga Waratahs was their team. And at the end of summer, they'd all started training again. And you've got to understand, in sort of rural Australia, rugby union is big, and you put a bunch of rugby union guys together, and they're Australian and their country, there's going to be a lot of alcohol, a lot of drinking. And so they had decided that they were all going to go away for the weekend on a camping trip. Down to Tumut, which is about 3-4 hours south. It's kind of in the high country of Australia. When I say high country in Australia, we're not talking Colorado high. We're talking Denver high, maybe. Well, Denver's in Colorado, but not like 14,000 feet, whatever. And he was like, do you want to come with me? Everyone's girlfriends and wives are coming. It's going to be this big thing. And I was like, well, I'm not really into camping. I'm not so sure about the camping thing. I'm not from a camping family. I'm from a 5-star resort family, where if we're going on a vacation, it's 5 stars, it's a resort, and my mother has rung ahead to find out what the thread count is of the sheets. So the whole camping idea is not something that I'm super familiar with. And I sort of resisted a little bit and was like, oh, I don't know, I'm happy if you want to go, but I think I might stay here. And he said, trust me, you'll have a great time. And of course, the warning bells went off, and every lesson that I had learnt from my mother for the previous, 24 years came running back into my head. And these were these 2 warning words. But I was like, no, he's different. I love him. We're this other couple. I can trust him when he says trust me. So I stupidly got myself together and we went camping. And it was under the pretense that there was going to be running water. And I had said, I'll go camping, but there has to be running water. That's the only thing that I'm like, has to have running water. And he's like, absolutely, there'll be running water, no problem. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. And he said again, trust me. And I was like, oh, my stupid cats. And I was like, oh dear, that's, now I've heard it twice. And I'm like, okay. He's like, I'll get everything organized. You just have to sit in the car. I'll drive, blah, blah, blah. So we're driving down south of Wagga Wagga. We're going through a town called Tumbarumba, and eventually we're heading up to Tumut. And the road goes from being a pretty poor bitumen road to being a dirt road, and it's getting narrower and narrower, and we've climbed up and now we're climbing down. And I was like, there's not going to be any running water here. There's no way there's going to be any running water here. We get down and we're sort of we're camping out by a lake area, so it's sort of down, pretty steep down, and there's just Australian bush right up both sides. And I'm thinking to myself, it's, summer in Australia. I'm thinking, oh crap, if there's a fire, we're all dead. There's no way we're getting out of here. Anyway, so we get down there, and everyone's setting up their camps. And Hugh, who was the boy at the time, never packed the tent. So we get to this camping ground where I've been told twice now to trust him. And against my better judgment and all of the lessons that my mother has taught me, I trusted him. And now we have no tent. The running water is, in fact, a small creek. There is no running water. There is, in fact, no toilets even, not even like long drop toilets. There's no toilets. And I am now stuck in an absolute hell with a football team of drunk men and trashy girls. And the trashy girls don't like me because I've like come in and taken one of theirs away and blah, blah, blah. So it was 24 hours of absolute hell. And what made it even worse was when we had been coming down the hill, I had sort of seen that the water looked a little bit greeny blue. It was very, very pretty from a distance. But at the end of summer in this particular area in Australia, you sort of have to worry a little bit about blue-green algae. And anyway, so I sort of had mentioned this. I was like, hey, the water doesn't look all that, like looks a bit concerning. Trust me, it's fine. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to, stay over here. I'm not feeling up for swimming. Well, the next day comes around. I've had to sleep not under a tent. I've had to sleep in a swag on the ground, surrounded by all sorts of Australian insects and spiders and all sorts of stuff. And then the next morning, all the boys who had been water skiing and swimming and were also very drunk woke up with horrible hangovers and some mild form of blue-green algae toxicity. And so I had to drive this boyfriend to the hospital where he was hospitalized for 3 days with blue-green algae toxicity, as was everybody else in the football team. And they were all like having these weird hallucinations and neurological symptoms. And so I guess the ending of my story is that to this day, I am still haunted by the lesson that my mother taught me about never trust a man when they say trust me. And I can hear a man say trust me, and I still am unable to trust them to this day. So it just goes to show that my mother had a long-lasting effect on me in more ways than just this, trust me, but a long-standing impact on me and my ability to trust. So that's sort of my haunted story, that to this day I am haunted by my mother's life lesson as a child. I will tell you that the only other time before this event that a man had ever said trust me was when my third grade math teacher was talking to us and said, "You're all going to love math, trust me." And I promptly stood up and said very loudly, "My mother told me never to trust a man when he says trust me." And I spent the rest of the day sitting outside the classroom. So it hasn't always been the best. But anyway, that's my haunted story.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Murray. That was fantastic. I hope that you guys can all hear that there's so many different takes on the theme of haunted. And so we're going to have one more storyteller, and then we'll take about a 5-minute break so people can refresh on popcorn or whatever beverage you're drinking right now. But our next storyteller, it is my honor to introduce Dr. Jen Schleining, who is actually Dr. Jen Schleining and not Kate Creevy. She's just using Katie's computer. And she's going to tell us a haunted story from her background. You're muted, Jen.
It was going to happen to somebody, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And thanks for taking one for the team.
Hey, amen, sister. All right. Have you guys ever experienced complete darkness? I'm not talking about the kind of darkness that you are out playing at night with your friends when you were kids. I'm not talking about the kind of darkness that you experienced playing hide and seek and you're in the very back ends of the closet. I'm talking about darkness that makes you think you're going insane, where you can't see your hand in front of your face. You don't know if your eyes are open or closed because both ways it looks exactly the same. I have, and I did repeatedly for 3 years as a national park ranger in Jewel Cave National Park. I invite you to join me on an adventure. Let's go to Hell Canyon in the very western parts of South Dakota, a place where few have been and even fewer have ventured into. A place that's filled with bats, gypsum spiders, needles, and passageways with names like the Miseries, the Tenderizers, the Big Crush, and other names that call to its next victim. Join me as we visit Jewel Cave. Do you hear that? Do you hear that whistle? It's hard to discern between all of the wind that I hear whistling through the trees, the tall pine trees above us. Is it a whistle or is it a groan? It's calling to us like the sirens call to sailors at sea. We should go. Let's go. There it is. I see the entrance. It's the entrance to a cave. It's small. I can see it though. Let's go. Do you feel the wind on our face coming out of the hole? Depending on the barometric pressure, the wind might be entering the cave or exiting the cave. It's almost as if it's a breathing organism. It's calling us to go in. Enter, it says. So we do. We crawl in and we enter a chamber. We go for a while. The path is treacherous. It's not even. And then we have to turn on our headlamps. Did you put new batteries in yours? If you didn't, I think you're going to wish that you would have. We go in further. Whew, it's starting to get cold. It's a little damp. It's chilly. It's an even 62 degrees everywhere in the cave, which is also partly why I think 62 degrees is my comfort zone. Take a deep breath. Do you smell the damp earth? The organic smell of being within the body of the earth? We follow it. We let the wind guide us through the passages. We see knobby, brown, tan, gray walls. It's all uneven. They're calcite crystals, but they're covered with a cloudy covering so that we don't see the shine from them. The floor is black with manganese. We carry the manganese further. We descend further, and now we're 832 feet. That's 8.5 stories below the surface of the earth. No one can hear us. We scream. There is no echo. It just falls away to the depths of the unknown. Stalactites and stalagmites are all around us, reaching from the top to the bottom, looking like the necropsy of an old chronic lunger in the feedlot, stretching to keep each other together. What else do you see? Do you see the gypsum? Do you see the gypsum ribbons, the needles that line the floor, the gypsum spiders that are on the wall, the flowers, the flowstone? It's an amazing world down here. Few have seen it. You're breathing air that no one has ever breathed before. And then we see it. There's a hole, a dark black hole. The black hole leads to the Miseries. We should go there. For 1,800 feet, this is 6 American football fields. All but 3/4 of it we can get by just crouching. We might have to get on our hands and knees. Might have to crawl a little bit, but we definitely cannot stand. The last 3/4, we have to belly crawl. Hand over hand over hand. There's not even enough room for you to pick your head straight up. You have your head turned to the side, and it's going to be that way for 3/4 of a football field. At the end, we get to the calorie counter. This is a hole so small that the only way to get through it is like birthing a calf, with the twists and the turns, and you have to turn just right before you exit into the big duh, which is a giant cavern 350 feet high on the other side of the calorie counter. We sit there and take a break because it has been a long journey thus far. We turn off our lamps, and it is pitch dark. The darkness that has never seen the light dark. As you close your eyes, you figure out that it's just ridiculous to do so, because with your eyes open, it's the exact same level of darkness. And all of a sudden, we don't realize what time of day it is. We don't realize what a second even is. You put your hand to your face, and you'd have no clue how far away it is until you touch your nose and you surprise yourself because you didn't see it coming. Soon, you don't even know that there are people around you. You wonder if you're ever going to get back out. You wonder if anyone even knows that you're there, if the world is even known that you ever existed. And soon, you start to wonder if perhaps you are going a little insane. So we turn our lights back on, and we head back out of the cave. It's time to go now. Our arms are heavy, our legs are tired, but we're part of the cave now. And we are part of this living being, like rumen microbes in the rumen fluid. We cannot separate ourselves from the lifeblood of this cave. And so as we exit, and as you leave the cave, there are really no words to truly describe that do it justice, the experience that you have just felt. And as you go away, listen for the whistle that signifies that a cave is near. Because now you're a part of it, and it's going to work its way into your soul, and you cannot escape. Thank you.
Awesome, Dr. Schleining. Holy cow, you creeped me out so many times in that story. I'm pretty sure I would still be in the calorie counter if I had gone with you. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, that was fantastic. Our next storyteller, who will wrap up, oh no, we're going to take a break. Sorry, I lost track. I got so creeped out, I lost track. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back with you in 5 minutes. All right, I hope everybody was able to stock up on refreshments. Our next speaker is a member of our communications team here in the college, and Aubrey has a great story giving us a little Texas A&M flavor. Aubrey, take it away.
All right, I tried to set the mood a little bit. I'm outside, I got a fire going, so hopefully this is good. So yeah, mine's a little closer to home. When I was in college, much like our current CVMBS ambassadors, I was a tour guide here at Texas A&M. And one of the things about being a tour guide is people love to tell you all of the things that they've ever heard about Texas A&M, whether they're true or not. So you kind of pick up all these urban legends over time, some with varying degrees of truth. And one of them, part of the story is true, is that the Animal Industries building is haunted on the Texas A&M campus. Supposedly there was a meat science professor who cut him into the basement and bled to death trying to reach the elevator, so that there's a ghost in the Animal Industries building. And the building's haunted, and you're not supposed to, if you go in there, be careful of the elevator. At one point, one of my friends heard this, that you always send the elevator back down to the bottom floor for the ghost to be able to use. So that was one. Another was that there was this old creepy nuclear fallout shelter underneath the academic building, because it was built during kind of the Cold War scare, where all the buildings had these different, like nuclear bunkers underneath where everybody could go. And another one was the YMCA building that supposedly you could still see the old pool from when the YMCA building used to operate. So, well, we're all talking about these at the visitor center, and one day we were sitting around and we decide, like, hey, we should check some of these out. We should all get together with a bunch of other tour guides and just see how many of these we can find in one evening. So we all get together, and before I get going, I'm going to preface this part with no laws were knowingly broken during this adventure. So we all get together, and the first thing we're going to do is try to get into the academic building. So we go to the academic building, and or the YMCA building. We go to the YMCA building, and one of the back doors was open. So we walk into the YMCA building. We go down to the basement of the YMCA building, and sure enough, you can see where there used to be a pool in the basement of that building. There's graffiti on the walls in the basement. They've redone the building since then, but back then there was graffiti on the walls going back, 10, 15 years of students coming in and out of this building. So then the next one, we were like, okay, we got to go to the academic building. We got to see this creepy nuclear fallout bunker that's underneath the academic building. So we go in the back, and this is a door that probably, if y'all have ever been in the academic building, you've probably walked by and never noticed. On the side that faces the Cushing Library, if you go in the academic building from that side, there used to be a row of like trash cans and recycling bins. And behind those, and you never noticed it, but is a door. And if you move the bins and open the door, and again, the door was unlocked, if you open the door, there's a staircase that leads down, and it is a creepy staircase. So we go down into there, and, on the wall, we see, we're like, oh, this is probably just a basement. It's not really that. And on the wall, there's the nuclear, kind of fallout logo with an arrow pointing down the hallway. So we go around the corner and we go back in there, and sure enough, there's a really odd nuclear fallout bunker underneath the academic building. So that one was kind of cool. But we saved the best one for last. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go check out the Animal Industries building, right? I mean, how creepy can this building be? It's been a long time since it was where the meat sciences were. I had class in that building. How creepy can the building be? So we couldn't really find our way in for a while. It has a lot of entrances and exits. So we break into two groups, and we're trying to find our way in. And, our group, we finally found a doorway, and we yelled at the other group, and the other group comes over. So we go in. We're on the first floor, and we're looking around, and, a lot of us had class in there. So how creepy is this building, really? We go down to the basement, and it's odd. It's definitely a weird-looking building. If you haven't seen the Animal Industries building over on main campus, it is still in use. It's now where the nuclear engineering department is, and it has all kinds of animal skulls and stuff on the outside of the building. So it's a kind of a creepy-looking building anyway. We get in there, and we're walking around, and again, it's late at night, and the door was open, but, if the campus cops show up, it's going to be hard to explain that the door was open. So we're all standing there, and all of a sudden, y'all, I'm not kidding, the elevator door opens. Just bing, door opens, and nobody is in the elevator. So our whole group just loses it. We all freak out. We run out of the building. Everyone meets up outside. We were like, what the heck was that? I've never seen, I don't believe in ghosts, but that was the creepiest thing I've ever, like, what just happened? And to this day, y'all, no one in our group will admit that they did it. Like, my theory has always been that someone in the group hit the elevator door button without anybody looking, but we weren't exactly by it. We were just kind of standing there in the lobby of the building. And like I said, we took off running, and it was definitely the scariest thing that, it really freaked me out. So I'm not saying that I believe the Animal Industries building is haunted, but I'm also not saying that I definitely don't believe that the Animal Industries building is haunted. And so that's my story. Thank y'all.
Oh, Aubrey, that was awesome. Thank you for that. That was fantastic. And this is one of those things, ladies and gentlemen, please don't try this at home. Like, he's not recommending that you go to the Animal Industries building, but if it is, let us know if it's haunted.
Yeah, definitely go during the daytime when it's open.
Fantastic. And I love the setting, Aubrey. This is fantastic. And it reminds me very much of this whole idea of a storytelling evening came from a previous storytelling group where we actually did this very theme outside around a fire. So maybe post-pandemic, our college could do this out in the courtyard at some point. Fantastic. Okay, our next storyteller is one of our DVM students, and she's got a great, again, a local story. And without further ado, Callie Rogers, you're up.
Can you see me? Oh, I feel so weird. This is so strange for me. Usually I'm not talking on these. So, yeah. So, if you know me, I'm a local at the College Station. I've born and bred here. I did end up going to Colorado State for my undergrad. But essentially up until that point, I was, hanging out in College Station, as fun as that is, and getting my education here. So that means that I went to A&M Consolidated High School, which is right down the street from A&M, hence the name. And at that time, it was the only high school in town. So I'm just excited. This is such a fun story. Okay, Consol. Yeah, so Consol is in itself creepy. But the creepy thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was something that happened my junior year of high school. So this is 2011, October 20th. So just like 9 years ago, a couple days ago. And this was, this is my story. So basically, I am me, very awkward, very similar to how I am now, if you can imagine. In high school, I'm in band. I'm pretty nerdy. I am, taking AP classes at the time because I know I want to do vet school and I want to do biomed sciences. So I'm trying to get some college credit. So I'm in, if you can imagine, I'm in AP chemistry, just kind of figuring that stuff out. It's in the fall of 2011. And I have a lab partner who, we'll call him Dexter, and you'll see why in a little bit. But if you can imagine this guy, he's about six foot. He's Filipino American. He wears glasses, kind of that quintessential nerd. We all know someone like this. He just raises his hand to answer every question in class, corrects the teacher. Always very dependable in a moment where you don't know anything. You can always depend on this guy to answer questions and take, kind of the pressure off you. And basically, he got to be my lab partner. I got to be his lab partner. We had a very interesting relationship, whereas I was not good at chemistry and he was great at chemistry. So we had this really, really great relationship, really very one-sided on his part doing the experiments and me just kind of supporting him emotionally, physically, and being there with him to get our grade up. So what ends up happening is that this is the kind of guy who, when we get to tie-dye our glasses, our lab goggles, I do blue, red, fun colors. He does completely black. He even somehow finds a way to do the lens completely black. So that's really interesting. He also wanted to borrow my copy of Game of Thrones at one point, and I wasn't done with it, so I said no. He wasn't happy about that. So just painting a picture for you. So the week of October 20th, we have a pretty big football game on Friday. And so Thursday, just regular class, whatever. I go home, come back the next day because we've got class again. It's Friday. We have lab. And Dexter, my lab partner, he's there. He's really doing the most, just doing this true titration moment. Science, love it. Like killing the game. And I'm just over here dancing, trying to get that good grade. And then he's, you know, we're done with class. Everything's good. I'm going on this band trip. And coming back from this band trip, my friend holds her phone in my face. This is about the time that iPhones had like kind of come out and were popular, and you could see news articles on your phone. It was super cool, and everyone was like showing off. And so she shows me this news article, and it says, Consol high school student, you know, arrested for killings of elderly man and wounding older woman. That's not exactly, obviously that'd be like a very wordy headline, but it was along those lines of essentially some teenager had stabbed an elderly man and killed him and severely wounded his wife. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then my friend scrolls down. I was like, isn't that your lab partner? Isn't that Dexter? Doesn't that look familiar to you? And I look and I'm like, I get it. Like, and then I see it. It definitely is Dexter. 100% is Dexter. And Dexter looks very creepy in this photo in a way that I hadn't really observed before. I'm not an observant person, and you'll kind of like be shocked by that later on. The signs were all there. But basically, Dexter, it turns out, and you know, we find out in the next weeks to months as his trial goes on, what had happened was Dexter had been stalking this elderly couple for weeks while we were in high school. We're juniors in high school, and he has been stalking this elderly couple for weeks. He decides on that night to go into their house. He kills the man who is a retired A&M professor and veteran. He kills him, he stabs him and shoots him, and then he finds the woman and slits her throat in that night, and then he kind of just like walks away. And they find him later based off of an eyewitness. And essentially, as soon as the police find him, and this all comes out in like the weeks after we realize what's gone down. So they find him, they kind of question him, and then they're like, okay, I don't know, like maybe not. And he goes to school the next day. So this happened on a Thursday night. He goes to school Friday. He essentially does our entire experiment on Friday, and I'm just sitting there being me, and he has killed somebody, and I'm just straight chilling. And then I find out later, immediately after school that day, he gets taken in by the police, and he confesses to murdering this man and wounding this woman. And he says he did it because he has a killer instinct, and he wanted to, like, they were good practice, and he didn't really know them at all. It's just he wanted to practice because, unlike other people who want to be doctors or vets or lawyer or whatever, he wanted to be a serial killer, and that was his goal in life. And that came out as well. So that's just another layer of creepy. And basically, Dexter went to jail. He was convicted, and honestly, it was just so shocking for all of us. And I think another little twist to that is that a couple weeks later, the principal, like our assistant principal or principal, came into our AP Chem class and, you know, called me, a couple of students else out, and there was some more in the hallway. It was like, hey, so, you know, I don't know if you guys have heard or anything, but he's talking to us. He says, so there has been a list that came out that he wrote in the investigation that Dexter has written some names on it. And we don't want to alarm anybody, but, you know, there were quite a few names on it. Kind of gives us a look like, obviously your names are on it, but he's not going to say that because it's like a CYA moment. He's like, but we have a counselor if you need to talk about anything. If there's anything you want to talk about, just don't, reach out, please, counselor. And we're all like, all right, super duper. But really in that moment, and I guess, again, this just kind of tells you the type of personality I am, type A, born for vet school. is that in that moment, wasn't super worried about that. I was just then realizing that Dexter had been carrying me in AP chemistry in my only chance at an A in that class was in prison and about to go to death row. So that was really a shocking moment for me. Really, like, you know, shook my foundation at that level. And just kind of as an epilogue, he is on death row now. He's on death row currently. The woman, I think, survived, but overall, essentially his whole reasoning behind it was that he wanted to hone his killer instinct and that he wanted to be a serial killer. So just living the dream over here in good old CSAT.
Thanks, Callie. I think we certainly have all met that guy in AP chemistry that we thought might be a serial killer, but really wasn't. So yeah, really interesting. Fascinating. All right. So what's interesting about storytelling night is it inspires people. And I've actually had somebody messaging me from the background to say, I didn't sign up, but I've got a story. And so this is what we're going to call our Cracker Jack teller, the person who volunteers on the spur of the moment. So Miss Linda Phillip, you want to join us and tell your story?
Hi, everybody. So I wasn't going to tell a story tonight, but this is a very short story that I'd like to tell y'all. And this happened 36 years ago. So it's a very sunny day in March 26, 1986, and it's my son's first birthday party. So I had gone and picked up my grandmother. She was in the nursing home at the time, and she came, never been to my house before. My uncle happened to go to the nursing home to see her and didn't find her and ended up at my house too. So I wasn't really sure that day who was going to end up coming to this birthday party. So I was sitting on the back porch with everyone, and my son was sitting on the floor, and he was opening gifts, and we were all just having a good time. And I saw someone else come, walking in the side yard, and it was my grandfather. And he was just wearing his plaid shirt, and I kind of smiled, and there for just a second, I forgot that he had been dead since 1982. He had always said he'd come back and see me, and I never believed in that until that day. So that's sort of my, I don't know if you'd say haunted story, but strange and unexplained story.
Fantastic, Linda. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for being willing to come forward in the last minute. That's a really, really cool experience. Thank you. All right, so we're going to bring it to a close here with our last storyteller, and that is going to be Dr. Katie Creevy, who you may recognize the background there. That is the haunted Washington, D.C. Take it away, Dr. Creevy.
Thanks. Hi. So that evening in October of 1993, I was in the shower, getting ready to go meet some friends on campus my senior year at Georgetown University. My roommate, Tristane, was visiting her boyfriend in France at the time, so I was alone. In our classy W Street apartment, we had this great skylight and this big bedroom with a loft there in Northwest DC, just outside of Georgetown. I wear contacts, so when I take a shower, my eyes are tightly closed, there with the white noise of the rushing water, alone in DC at night. I reached up, shower caddy, eyes tightly closed, to get my shampoo, and that's when I felt it. My shampoo bottle was upside down, resting on the little cap. Confused, I moved my hand to the next bottle, also upside down. Time slowed to a trickle. In that sliver of a moment before my eyes could snap open, in that heartbeat, in the shower, naked, alone, 20 years old, I had the clarity of total awareness, and I knew that there was an axe murderer on the other side of my map of the world shower curtain who had turned those bottles over to torment me and was now watching my horrified discovery and the remaining seconds of my tragic life. My eyes snapped open, and there was no one there. But vision confirmed what my fingers had felt. My upside-down shampoo bottle, upside-down conditioner, Tristane's upside-down Aveda products, both of them. She'd been in France for a week. In my sharpened mental state, I knew now that the axe murderer was just outside the bathroom door, but he didn't know I was on to him, and so I could escape. I left the shower running for an auditory screen. I stepped silently from the tub, wrapped myself in a bathrobe. The door to the bathroom was directly across the door to the apartment, and so I took a deep breath, and I flung forcefully the door open, hoping I would stun my intruder just for a minute, and I threw my body out the front door of the apartment, down the stairs, into W Street, knowing the maniac was hot on my heels. Silence. I was in W Street, alone, barefoot, sopping wet, in a bathrobe, all alone. And now, what? It's 1993. There are no cell phones. As an undergrad in the city, I didn't know my neighbors. There was no cozy corner store or firehouse or friendly beat cop. The DC streets are not necessarily safe without mace, which I didn't have. Never mind a wallet, or my car keys, or clothing. So I did what I had to do. I did what you would have done. I went back inside. The front door was swinging open. The shower still hissed. I collected my mace from off the key ring by the door, ready for a fight. Heart pounding, I systematically prowled my own apartment, kitchen, living room, little spare room at the back with its closet full of camping gear and formal wear, the back door to the alley stairs firmly locked, and then back past the bathroom, shower still running, into the front bedroom which faced the street. Empty. But it had that loft with its suspended wooden stairs that creaked when you climbed them. And as I climbed them, I was aware that my head would come in reach of the madman hiding in the loft before I could see him. So I led with my mace, silently, barefoot, creeping up the stairs, head held back, and it was empty. I was alone. And that was the beginning of a series of events that eventually became our routine. Tristane came back from France 3 days later, and she accepted this story with her typical well-adjusted grace. She was quite comfortable with the notion of a benevolent ghost who manipulated objects but left all the doors safely locked. There was often subtle disarray. The TV was on. Clean cups that we had put away rested on the counter. Unexpected lamps were lit. Once the couch was moved to the side wall of the living room. And then the paranoia. Like, did I leave that shirt on the back of that chair? Or did she put the phone on top of the fish tank like that? Or maybe I did it. I am pretty sure that book was on that bookshelf this morning, wasn't it? But nothing was ever taken. And the doors, front and back, were always locked. We never called the police. I had an uneasy relationship with authority in those days, and I wasn't always sure that they were on my side. And at the same time, I respected their mission, and I didn't really think that the police should respond to calls about unexpected bath product behavior. It seemed childish, actually, or selfish somehow to ask for help. The part that I really hated and that I never really got used to were the phone calls. Immediately after we turned out the lights at night in that front bedroom that faced the street, the phone would ring. And when we would answer it, no one spoke. It didn't happen every night, but 3 or 4 nights a week was plenty. We stopped answering the phone. Tristane continued to visit her boyfriend in France, and it was definitely hardest when I was alone. Because in the part of my mind that embraced wonder and nature and high fantasy and the intangible power of the people against systems of tyranny, I just knew that there had to be ghosts. The world is full of things, vast, gorgeous things we can't understand, and we would be fools to deny the possibility of entities beyond measurement. But in the part of my mind that mistrusted authority and social inequity and racism and sexism and humanity and everything about people, I knew that if there was someone crazy enough in the world to break into my house, turn my shampoo upside down, and leave, locking the doors behind him, then there was someone in the world crazy enough to do anything. And I was afraid of what he would do to me next. So that was how we lived that fall and all winter. And it ceased to even be a topic of conversation, which is why I don't really know how or when it stopped. But one day in March, maybe one of us said to the other, we haven't gotten that creepy lights out phone call in a while. And in April, someone said, I think our ghost is gone. Nothing's ever really moved around anymore. Which could just about be the end of this story, except for one more thing. I had a formal event to attend in May. And one day, my friend Mike was over and Tristane were hanging out in the living room, and they offered to help me pick an outfit. So I trotted off into the spare room where we kept these things, into that little closet, and I put on a black silk dress, and I reached up to get my high heels off the top shelf where I kept them stored in their box. The shoebox was surprisingly heavy, and the lid fell off when I nearly dropped it. And inside, with my shoes, was a key ring. 60, 70 keys, maybe more. When I carried it into the living room to show it to Mike and Tristane, the pallor of my face was reflected in theirs. What is this? And why is it in my shoes? But I knew what it had to mean. We had never had a ghost. We had had a stalker. Some horrible, cruel person who had terrorized us, had probably terrorized every home represented by a key on that ring, and for some reason gave up his reign of terror and hid the evidence in my home, in my shoes. I was shocked. I was deeply disturbed. I was furious. I rushed to the front door to prove that here is an answer. These crazy events have an explanation, and we're going to prove it. This was a person, the landlord, maybe the handyman, some employee who did this to us, and we will call the police, and these keys will be traceable, and we will have justice for those voiceless phone calls in the night. And I tried every key on that ring in my door, and none of them fit. So, did we have a stalker? Or was it a ghost?
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Creevy. for bringing this evening to an end. And now we are all creeped out. And so awesome. A very, very cool group of storytellers tonight. I know we're not all in person, but here's a standing ovation to all of our storytellers tonight for their courage of coming out and telling their story. We hope that this
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. This is going to be, I hope, the beginning of a long series of storytelling events. They'll not all be spooky, but we hope to come up with a theme and have something more frequently, because this was a lot of fun tonight, and I hope you all had a good time. And I hope you can all get some sleep tonight, or not. Good night, everybody.